The billboard on the edge of Route 66 flickered like it was struggling to stay alive, its bright promise cutting through the early morning fog. Maya saw it every day on her walk to the diner, usually without thinking much about it. Smiling faces, perfect skin, clean clothes, and a message about a better tomorrow. She used to roll her eyes at ads like that. Life had taught her that tomorrow didn't always show up the way it was promised. At 22, Maya had already buried both of her parents. Her mother's laughter still echoed in her head when the nights got too quiet, and her father's work boots remained by the door of their small house, untouched since the day he never came back from the construction site. Grief didn't arrive loudly anymore. It sat with her, heavy and familiar like an unpaid bill. Every morning she tied her apron, forced a smile, and served coffee to people who talked about weekend plans she couldn't afford to imagine. The diner smelled like burnt toast and cheap coffee, but it paid the rent, barely. Tips went into a chipped coffee can hidden in her locker. On it, she had written one word with a faded marker: California. She didn't know exactly what she would do there or who she would become. She only knew that staying meant slowly forgetting who she used to be, before loss hollowed her out. One morning, as the sun rose and the billboard lights buzzed back to life, Maya stopped walking. For the first time, she really looked at it. The slogan was simple, almost careless. Still trying? So are we. Something about it felt different. It didn't promise success or happiness. It just acknowledged the effort. Trying. That word landed deeper than she expected. Her chest tightened, and she felt tears threaten. Not from sadness, but from recognition. She was still trying. Waking up, working, surviving. Maybe that was enough to keep going. Maybe hope didn't need to be loud to be real. Maya wiped her eyes, straightened her jacket, and kept walking. The ad might have been selling something, but it had accidentally sold her a reason to take another step forward. And for the first time in a long while, that felt like more than enough. The diner bell rang at 6:02 a.m., right on schedule. Maya didn't have to look up to know who it was. Tom always came early, before the rush, before the noise. He liked the quiet, and so did she. He took the same booth by the window, the one with a crack in the vinyl seat and a view of the parking lot. Maya poured his coffee without asking. Black. No sugar. No cream. Tom's hands were steady but worn, like they'd carried too much for too long. A faded jacket hung off his shoulders, and on the inside pocket, just barely visible, was a stitched American flag. He thanked her the same way every time, with a nod that meant more than words. Maya liked him because he never rushed her and never pretended life was easy. That morning, as she reached for the coffee pot, Tom's eyes drifted to the coffee can sitting near the register. The word California stared back at him. He squinted, then smiled. Not the kind people used in ads, but the kind that came from remembering something painful and beautiful at the same time. Big dream, he said gently. Maya shrugged. Just a place I think about. Tom took a slow sip. I used to think about places like that, too. Before the posters, before the commercials. He paused, staring into the dark liquid. They made everything look clean, purposeful. She waited. Some stories needed space. They didn't show the nights you couldn't sleep, he continued, or the parts of yourself you don't get back. He looked up at her then. But I don't regret believing. Belief got me out of a bad town once, even if it didn't fix everything. Maya felt something shift. She wasn't being warned away. She was being understood. When Tom stood to leave, he reached into his pocket and placed a folded bill beneath the coffee can. It was more than his usual change. For the road, he said. Whenever you're ready. After he left, Maya unfolded the bill with trembling fingers. It wasn't about the amount. It was about the message hidden inside it, that someone saw her trying and decided it mattered. She slipped the money into the can and went back to work, her steps a little lighter. Outside, the billboard hummed in the distance, and for the first time, Maya didn't feel alone in believing it might be telling the truth. Maya didn't plan the video. It happened late at night after her shift, when the house felt too quiet and the walls seemed to listen. She sat on the edge of her bed, still wearing her diner hoodie, phone balanced against a stack of books. The light was bad, her eyes were tired, and for a moment she almost stopped. This wasn't how stories were supposed to start. No filters, no music, no perfect angle. She pressed record anyway. "I don't really know who needs to hear this," she said, her voice uneven. "But if you're still trying, I see you." The words surprised her as they came out. She talked about waking up when it hurt, about losing people and learning how to function around the absence. She admitted she didn't have a plan, only a direction written on a coffee can. California. Saying it out loud made it feel less ridiculous and more real. She didn't cry on camera, but her eyes shone with something close. She spoke slowly, carefully, like she didn't want to lie by accident. "I think we've all been sold this idea that life should make sense by now," she said. "And if it doesn't, we think we failed. But maybe we're just early." When she finished, she stared at the screen, finger hovering over delete. People online were cruel. America loved confidence, polish, happy endings. This was none of those things. It was unfinished. Just like her. She posted it anyway. By morning, the notifications stacked up faster than she could read them. Messages from places she'd only seen on maps. A nurse in Ohio who watched it during her break. A warehouse worker in Texas who said it made him feel less invisible. A college kid in New York who admitted she'd almost given up the night before. Maya sat on the floor, back against her bed, scrolling through strangers' honesty. She hadn't sold anything. She hadn't promised a miracle. She'd just told the truth. And somehow that truth had traveled farther than any ad she'd ever seen. Before heading to work, she opened the coffee can and slipped her phone inside for a moment, like a quiet thank you. Whatever happened next, she knew one thing for sure. Being real was no longer something she had to apologize for. The bus ticket sat in Maya's inbox for 3 days before she opened it. She kept rereading the subject line, half expecting it to disappear like a mistake. One way, westbound, the kind of decision people in movies made without flinching. In real life, it came with shaking hands and 1,000 quiet doubts. On the 4th morning, she finally tapped the screen. The confirmation number glowed back at her, solid and undeniable. She packed the night before she left. Not much fit into one duffel bag anyway. 2 pairs of jeans, a sweater that still smelled faintly like her mother's perfume, and a small notebook filled with half-written thoughts. At the bottom, she placed her mother's ring, wrapped in tissue, like a promise she didn't yet know how to keep. She walked through the house slowly, touching door frames, pausing in rooms heavy with memory. Leaving didn't mean forgetting, she told herself. It meant carrying things differently. The bus station was louder than she expected. Announcements echoed overhead, blending with laughter, arguments, and the hiss of engines. America felt alive there, restless and in motion. Maya found her seat and pressed her forehead to the cool window as the bus pulled away. Her town shrank into something manageable, then disappeared entirely. Miles rolled by, and so did faces. A kid across the aisle watched cartoons on a cracked tablet, headphones too big for his head. A woman whispered affirmations under her breath, eyes closed as if rehearsing courage. Somewhere behind her, a man talked loudly about a job that didn't work out. No one looked like the ads. Everyone looked like effort. As landscapes shifted from flat fields to wide skies and rising hills, Maya felt fear loosen its grip. She wasn't running anymore. She was moving toward something, even if she couldn't name it yet. She pulled out her phone and reread the comments on her video, each one a small reminder that she wasn't alone on this road. When the sun dipped low, casting everything in gold, Maya smiled softly. The bus kept heading west, and for the first time in a long while, so did her belief. Los Angeles didn't welcome Maya with fireworks or music. It welcomed her with heat, traffic, and a sky stretched wide and pale blue, like it was daring her to fill it with something. She stepped off the bus with her duffel bag cutting into her shoulder and a nervous excitement buzzing through her chest. This was it. No safety net, no familiar streets, just a city that moved fast and didn't wait for anyone to catch up. She slept her first week on a couch that wasn't really a couch, in an apartment that always smelled like instant noodles and ambition. Her host was kind but busy, chasing deadlines and auditions of their own. Every morning, Maya woke up early, scrolled through casting calls, and sent out submissions with the quiet hope that one of them would land. Commercials, background roles, voiceovers, anything. She learned quickly that rejection in LA didn't come gently. Sometimes it didn't come at all. Days blurred together. Maya walked miles because buses cost money. She ate cheap food and reminded herself that this was temporary. At night, she replayed her parents' voices in her head, wondering if they would be proud or worried. Probably both. On the toughest days, she watched her own video again. Not out of vanity, but because it reminded her why she'd come. She hadn't promised success. She'd promised honesty. Then one afternoon, her phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. She almost ignored it, assuming it was another automated message. Something told her not to. The voice on the other end was calm, professional. An agency had seen her video, not her headshot, not her resume, her video. "You feel real," the woman said. "Brands are looking for that now." Maya sat on the curb outside a convenience store, heart pounding, listening as possibilities opened up in careful, measured sentences. It wasn't a contract. It wasn't fame. It was a meeting. A chance. When the call ended, Maya stared at the city moving around her. People hustling, cars honking, dreams colliding. She laughed softly, tears stinging her eyes. Los Angeles hadn't promised her anything. But for the first time since she arrived, it felt like it had noticed she was there. The studio kitchen looked nothing like the ones in glossy commercials. It was smaller, quieter, almost ordinary. Sunlight filtered through a single window, catching dust in the air. Maya stood just outside the set, clutching a paper cup of water, listening to the low murmur of the crew. Her name was on the call sheet, typed neatly like she belonged there. She kept rereading it to make sure it was real. The ad wasn't for anything flashy. No luxury cars, no dramatic music, just coffee, morning coffee, the kind people drank before the world asked too much of them. The director approached her with a gentle smile, not the rushed kind she'd expected. "I don't want you to act," he said quietly. "I want you to remember." That single sentence hit harder than any instruction. Maya nodded, unsure what memory he meant, but when the camera rolled, it came naturally. She thought of early mornings at the diner, pouring coffee for strangers while pretending she wasn't tired. She thought of her mother humming in the kitchen, the smell of warmth and safety. She thought of grief that never announced itself, but always showed up. Action. Maya lifted the mug, hands steady, but eyes thoughtful. She spoke the line like it was a truth she'd learned the hard way, not something written by a copywriter. There was a pause afterward, a small breath she hadn't planned. The room stayed silent. No one cut. No one rushed her. "Cut," the director finally said softly. He didn't look at the monitor right away. He looked at her. "That," he said, "was exactly it." They did a few more takes, but none felt forced. Each one carried the same quiet weight. Maya wasn't selling a product. She was offering a moment people recognized from their own lives. Between takes, she sat alone, surprised by how calm she felt. This wasn't about proving herself, it was about showing up as she was. When filming wrapped, the director thanked her, genuinely. Outside, Maya leaned against the building, breathing in the city air. She didn't know if the ad would matter to anyone else, but it mattered to her. For the first time, her story wasn't something she had to hide. It was something worth sharing. The ad aired on a Sunday afternoon, slipped quietly between loud commercials and halftime commentary. Maya didn't know the exact moment it would come on. She was sitting in a laundromat, folding clothes that weren't really hers, the steady hum of machines filling the room. Her phone rested beside her, face down, like she didn't trust herself to keep checking it. When it finally buzzed, she jumped. The first message was from an unknown number. A photo followed before any words. It showed the small diner back home, the same cracked vinyl booth by the window, and a television mounted in the corner. On the screen was Maya. Not exaggerated, not smiling too wide, just there. The next message came right after. "It's Tom. You did it." Her hands shook as she stared at the image. The noise of the laundromat faded into something distant and unreal. That tiny space, the one she thought she'd left behind, was now holding her face, her pause, her breath. She felt tears come fast and sudden, and she didn't bother wiping them away. More messages followed. Old co-workers, a neighbor she hadn't spoken to in years, strangers who recognized her from the video she'd posted months ago. None of them talked about the coffee. They talked about how it felt, about mornings, about trying again. That night, Maya walked home slowly, letting the city move around her. Success didn't crash into her like fireworks. It settled in quietly, like relief. It paid the next month's rent. It bought groceries without anxiety. But it didn't erase the ache of missing her parents. It didn't suddenly make life simple. Back in her room, she sat on the edge of the bed and thought about what came next. The industry would want more smiles, more polish, more certainty. She wasn't sure she could give them that. What she could give was honesty, presence, the permission to be unfinished. Before sleeping, she replied to Tom with a simple message. "Thank you for believing before it was easy." She placed her phone down and closed her eyes, knowing that being seen didn't mean being done. It just meant the story was finally being heard. The emails didn't arrive all at once. They came slowly, carefully, like the industry itself was deciding how close it wanted to get to her. Some messages were excited, full of exclamation points and promises. Others were polished and distant, written in a language that talked around feelings instead of naming them. Maya read every word, learning to recognize which offers wanted her image and which wanted her voice. At her first follow-up meeting, a producer slid a mood board across the table. Perfect kitchens, perfect families, perfect smiles. "People want aspirational," he said confidently. Maya nodded, then gently pushed the board back. "People want permission," she replied. "Permission to be tired, to be human." The room went quiet. She expected resistance. Instead, the producer leaned back, thoughtful. "We've been hearing that," he admitted. Maya began choosing differently. She said no more than she said yes, which felt risky, but honest. She agreed to stories about nurses ending long shifts, single dads learning how to cook breakfast, young renters unlocking their first apartment alone. Small moments, real ones. On set, crews listened more closely. Directors stopped asking her to smile wider. They asked her to breathe. Between shoots, Maya kept in touch with the people who had written to her during the early days. She answered messages late at night, sitting cross-legged on her bed. She told them she still got scared, that nothing was guaranteed. Somehow, that made them trust her more. Money came, slowly but steadily. She sent some home. She paid off a little debt. She bought herself time. Fame hovered nearby, tempting and loud, but it never fully landed. Meaning did. Meaning stayed in the quiet moments, reading a thank you note from a stranger, recognizing herself in someone else's story. One evening, Maya opened the old coffee can she'd carried with her across the country. Inside were folded bills, scribbled notes, and now printed emails from people she'd never met. She smiled softly. She hadn't come to California to become perfect. She'd come to become real. And somehow that turned out to be enough. The first check Maya sent home felt heavier than any bag she'd carried. She stared at the envelope for a long time before sealing it, tracing the address with her finger like it might disappear. It wasn't a huge amount. It wouldn't change anyone's life overnight. But it was proof that something fragile she'd believed in had turned into something solid. Proof that trying could echo back. She added a note inside, written in careful handwriting. "I'm okay. I'm still learning. Thank you for never letting me forget who I am." She didn't know who would read it first, but that didn't matter. It was her way of closing a loop. Life in Los Angeles found a rhythm that didn't feel borrowed anymore. Mornings started with coffee and silence, sunlight creeping across the floor. Some days were busy with shoots and meetings. Other days were empty, stretching long and uncertain. Maya learned not to panic during the quiet. Quiet didn't mean failure, it meant waiting. She kept replying to messages from people who had found her story when they needed it most. A man who'd been laid off at 52. A woman starting over after a divorce. A teenager afraid to disappoint everyone. Maya never offered advice. She offered presence. "I don't have it figured out either," she'd write. "But we're still here." One afternoon, walking past a construction site, Maya froze when she recognized the boots behind the fence, steel-toed, scuffed, familiar. For a moment, grief hit her hard and sudden. She breathed through it, remembering she didn't have to outrun pain to move forward. She could carry it and still choose joy when it showed up. That night she sat on her floor and opened her notebook. The pages were no longer half empty. They were filled with observations, small truths, unfinished lines. She realized she wasn't just being cast anymore. She was becoming a storyteller. Maya taped the old coffee can label into the notebook. California. It wasn't a destination now. It was a reminder. She hadn't crossed the country to escape her life. She'd crossed it to meet it honestly, one moment at a time.